Hi, my name's Isaac Shutt. I'm an estate planning attorney. I'm licensed to practice law both in Texas and in Wyoming. And in this video, I'm going to talk about something that you've probably got all wrong, and that is the prenup, the premarital agreement. And the reason that I say that you've probably got it all wrong is that you probably have some preconceived notions that are just dead wrong. And, a lot of people think that premarital agreements are only for rich people. When some old dude who's like in his 60s or something marries somebody who's in her 20s and, really wants to make sure that she can't take advantage of him financially. I mean, maybe for that guy, a prenup is a good idea. But even for kind of everybody, a prenup makes a lot of sense. And here's why. In Texas, we are a community property state. And what that means is all of the assets that you get during the marriage, like all of your income and dividends, your paycheck, almost all that stuff, it will be presumed to be community property. That means that paycheck that had your name on it isn't really yours, it's ours. It belongs to both of you because it was earned during your marriage, so the law presumes that it was community property. I don't care if you take your community property and put it in an account with only your name on it. If you go through a divorce, guess what? That account will probably be split with your ex. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind, that just because your name's on the paycheck or just because your name is on that account, that does not necessarily mean that you'll get to keep those assets if you get divorced. But here's the other thing from the estate planning side that people often get wrong. These community property laws also apply if you pass away. So it's not just, the prenup is not just a divorce planning document, it's kind of an estate planning document as well. Let's just say that you have a bunch of assets in your name and then you pass away, and at the time you were married, and let's say you've got a couple of kiddos. Well, here's the deal. If you don't have a prenup, half of everything you have is legally presumed to belong to your spouse. And guess what? She doesn't necessarily have to give anything to your kids. So if you have a will that says, I give everything to my kids when I pass away, your everything is probably only half if you're married when you pass away. And so your surviving spouse will retain her half of the community, and you're only capable of giving away your half of the property. So if you want more control about who gets what, not only in the context of a divorce, but also if you pass away, you should totally think about a premarital agreement. And I think premarital agreements have sort of a unfair, unearned connotation here in Texas. I think that being a community property state, a lot more people should give thought to the prenup. Because being a community property state with having these default divisions of assets if you divorce or if you pass away, these defaults for a lot of people don't make sense. In fact, a lot of times when I deal with the surviving family after somebody's passed away, they are shocked about who inherits what in the absence of a will. And even with a will, knowing that you're only capable of giving away your half and the other spouse gets to keep half, this blows people's minds all the time. And I think to myself, yeah, well, if that person had had a premarital agreement, if that person had had a will, or even better yet, a trust, we wouldn't find ourselves in this position. Those default community property laws only matter if you don't have a premarital agreement. Now, I'm not going to leave you just with that. I want to tell you how to get a premarital agreement, because you will be shocked at how easy it is to get a premarital agreement. The first thing you want to do is get a lawyer. And each of you and your fiance should probably have your own lawyer, because that'll actually help make it more legally binding in the event one or the other tries to contest that document. Now, when you do that premarital agreement, you're going to lay out basically what your assets are coming into the marriage. And in that premarital agreement, you're going to lay out basically whether or not you want to have community property at all. So it's not just about saying, okay, I'm going to keep all of these things during my marriage. A lot of premarital agreements say, you know what? I know Texas is a community property state, but I don't want to have community property. My paycheck that comes to my name, I think should stay in my name. So you can agree to do those kinds of things and sort of toggle off those default laws by having a premarital agreement. So again, step one is one of you will need to go see a lawyer to start the first draft of the premarital agreement. And then step two is to have the other spouse do a review of that premarital agreement with her own attorney, because you don't want the other person to claim that she didn't understand the premarital agreement. Both of you needs to be clear-minded and open-eyed about what that agreement states. Once the premarital agreement is in place, you're really supposed to ratify or basically re-sign that agreement after the time you're married. Now from there, that does not mean that the premarital agreement is set in stone and you can never change it. In fact, we have a lot of clients that come back to our office years down the line because they want to revise their premarital agreement. So that's another myth. You know, you can revise your premarital agreement. So just because you started off with version A, you know, after you've been married 10 or 20 years, maybe you move to version B, or maybe you discard it altogether. Now, of course, to discard a premarital agreement or to change it, that's going to take two to tango. That's going to take both of you, but you can do that. And the last misconception that people often get wrong about premarital agreements is that it's going to dictate everything that's going to happen if you pass away. Now, as an estate planner, one thing that I encourage is for you to look at, okay, if I have a premarital agreement, I need to see how that jives with my estate plan. But the premarital agreement merely gives you the option, gives you the flexibility to give away all of this range of assets. That doesn't mean you can't give it to your spouse in your will or a beneficiary designation. You can still totally do that. Just because your premarital agreement draws clear lines between his and hers does not mean that when he passes away, he can't give her stuff at the time of his death. You totally can. That's not violation of the premarital agreement. You have the power to do what you want with your estate planning document, including giving it to the other spouse. So a lot of times people have a premarital agreement and then they have a will or trust that says, yeah, well, when I die, I want her to get it all when I pass away anyway. That's totally fine. That's totally legal. So anyway, I just want to give a quick summary of this video, which I hope you found very helpful. Number one is, I have seen over and over and over again that people have misconceptions about premarital agreements. Most people think that premarital agreements only lay out what's his and what's hers coming into a marriage, but it also lays out whether or not you will have a community property estate at all. Another common misconception is that once you sign the premarital agreement, you can never change your mind. That's not true. While it does take two to tango, you both would have to amend the agreement together. You can totally do that or even revoke it. Number three, that last misconception is just because you have a premarital agreement, you can't list your spouse as a beneficiary in a will or a trust. That's wrong. Just because you have a premarital agreement does not mean you can't give her assets or give him assets in your will or trust. You can go for it. You can totally do that. But with the premarital agreement, you had that freedom. And those default Texas laws didn't dictate what would happen to half of your estate upon your passing. You got to say what would happen to your estate upon your passing. So, I hope you understand that a premarital agreement is not just about divorce, and it has an estate planning tinge to it as well. Because when you think about just who I'm going to give things away to when I pass away, keep in mind, a community property state, the legal presumption is that giving everything away is actually only giving away half, because your surviving spouse has control over the other half as the presumed community property. So this premarital agreement thing, I think, should be more popular. I think more people should give thought to a premarital agreement. And if we can be of further assistance, we would love to hear from you. Again, my name's Isaac Shutt. I'm an estate planning and probate attorney. I'm licensed to practice law both in Texas and in Wyoming.